This man is Reed Tobson.
I'm Reed Tobson.
Reed here is the outpost administrator for the town of Edgewater in the game Out of Worlds. Reed will doom his town on the whim of a minor persuasion check. Reed is an idiot, and to understand that, we need to talk about Deus Ex and Vents. Deus Ex is an immersive sim that was released in June 2000 and has become known as the game that inspired multiple ways to complete your objective. It wasn't the first game to introduce multiple paths in a mission, but it did it so well that now when we talk about immersive sims that give players the opportunity to complete level in various different ways, we reference Deus Ex. Fans of Deus Ex hold up Liberty Island, the first level of Deus Ex, as a masterpiece in level design because of the sheer amount of ways you can approach it. Indeed, it's what many of us regard as the key component to the immersive sim genre, the ability to explore and try things out and be rewarded for that experimentation. But that seed planted in Liberty Island back in 2000 has grown into full-blown expectation for games in the modern era. Unless the game is a very strict linear corridor shooter, gamers now expect there to be multiple ways to solve a problem. This has grown past the immersive sim and into a ton of other genres. RPGs are in particular targeted here because not only is that legacy of Deus Ex an issue, but so is the comparison to tabletop RPGs, where the breadth of player agency is massive. This expectation is of course known to games developers, and the pressure is on them to create an experience with multiple solutions, and it can weigh quite heavily. Sometimes, when you're playing games, it'll feel like the multiple paths are there not because they're inherently good or provide a positive experience, but because they have to be there because this is the type of game they're making. I call this the Deus Ex Human Revolution Vent problem. I'm not going to spend too long on this, as HBomber Guy has already talked about this at length in his review of Deus Ex Human Revolution. It's very good and I've linked it in the description. It's definitely worth a watch.
In this game, more often than not, vents take you directly past the problem. You could deal with the guys in the next area using stealth or combat, or you can go in the vent next to where you came in that takes you past them. Turret and landmine on the wall and camera which will set off the alarms, or go over here and hack the camera. You know, the intended challenge of the room. The point of this room is to show you the value of hacking. Or you could get in the vent that leads directly behind all of it and just walk past.
The vent problem is essentially when a developer feels pressure to add multiple ways of solving an objective, but can't actually think of any good ones, so they stick an event. It's a quick, easy way for a player to feel smart for finding a way that's not immediately obvious, but if not done well, can go awry pretty quickly.
There's this one level in Hengshire where the bad guys have locked down an apartment complex, and you have to get inside to get to the hacker's computer I mentioned before. Now the front entrance is blocked off, so you either have to get into a big fight right away, or maybe you can go all the way around the sides and up a ladder, and then you can sneakily take out a few guys and use stealth from there. Wow, multiple paths, this level's pretty good. The developers are trying to reward you for thinking logically about the 3D space. Or there's a vent right here. This vent takes you inside the complex and into a well-guarded area with some interesting points of cover. This area could be a really cool stealth experience. Oh my god, I can't believe you found another vent! You're such a good boy! This vent takes you to the upper ground level you could have had a fun time sneaking to, where you can easily just walk to the elevator to the top floor without being seen. On the top floor holy shit! I haven't even left the elevator! Fucking come on, guys! This vent takes you past all the guards to directly next to the computer you need to access. This is the absolute bottom of the downward spiral that starts when you try to make a game like Deus Ex simpler. You make this how exploration works.
Now, I'm just a person on YouTube who makes stupid videos. I'm not a game developer, but I felt this pain in a similar fashion through my Dungeon Master experience. As a Dungeon Master, you create an encounter, you plan things out the way you think is cool, but players will be players, and they'll find ways to ignore everything you've done, merrily enjoying their idiotic frolics through your cool dungeon as you throw the script that you've worked on for hours into the garbage. All Dungeon Masters will agree with me when I say the way players like bumble through and complete your objective is messy, it's unorganised, and it's not nearly as cool as the way you planned. But it's better because they did it through their agency. It's very, very difficult to create side paths as cool as the main path you've planned, and this is only compounded in a video game where you don't have a human Dungeon Master to respond to and make cool things up on the fly. Unless you are an incredible game developer, it's almost impossible to have 5 ways to reach the same objective and for them to all be as cool and well written as each other. but it's what we expect these days because we've seen it done, and that's the bar. So let's start circling back to our boy Reed now.
I'm Reed Tobson.
What has all that got to do with him and Outer Worlds? Well, Outer Worlds has a big vent problem. Are there even vents in Outer Worlds? I can't remember, but we're not actually talking about the physical vents you walk through now, we're talking about conversation vents. Yes, I am absolutely butchering this analogy. Similar to Deus Ex, Obsidian, when they created Outer Worlds, were keen to focus on building a game that allowed for player agency.
We wanted to include that openness, that ability to drop the player into different scenarios, different quest lines, and let them really use the tools that we've given them to play the game their way. You know, whether they want to sneak around, whether they want to fight their way through something, or whether they want to talk their way through something. You know, we always wanted to give players that freedom, which, you know, sure is something that players will recognize from games like New Vegas, and it's something that our development team, you know, whether it's on, you know, New Vegas or Pillars or Tyranny, something we've learned how to do well and manage and polish.
If you listen to games developers talk about their games, especially when they're open world RPGs, you've heard this sort of rhetoric before. You can sneak your way in, you can talk your way in, you can blast your way in. And to be fair on Obsidian, this is something they delivered with Outer Worlds. There are a lot of quests in the game, and very few of them have only one way to solve them. In fact, in a lot of cases, the game will present you with morally grey options and lets you decide on which shade of grey you'd rather take. This all sounds great, right? But now let's talk specifically about Outer Worlds' vent problem. With the focus on delivering an array of options to the player in regards to completing quests, the quest designers and writers need to bring their A game. If every quest has several ways to complete it, then can Obsidian make all of them interesting? Or, more to the point for this video, can they make all of them consistent and believable? So what do I mean by that? Well, Outer Worlds is a game with a very clear theme. It's a dystopian future where corporations run everything, expanding beyond just planet Earth into space and the thousands of other planets. It brings in all your usual cyberpunky tropes. Brutal corporations, savage, rampant capitalism, and the resistance that comes with it. So people in this game are radical. The NPCs you meet in the game who work for the corporations are, to put it pretty clearly, psychopaths, and the people who fight against them have been moulded through struggle and conflict. Because everything is so heightened, even the regular NPCs who just try to get by have fairly radical opinions on things. So, when we drop the player character into the world and create a game where they can solve quests in a number of different ways, including through conversation, that's where the consistency of writing gets difficult, and specifically the consistency of NPC writing. If you're handed a quest by a resistance fighter who has just spent the last 2 years losing everything to the corporation that has taken over their home, can you talk that person down with a persuasion check? Should you be able to?
Really, it's all about the choices that you can make as a player and the fact that we allow you to take your character in any direction that you can conceive of, and the game reacts to that. We give you very different paths that you can take. So the combination of like what choices am I going to make from a plot standpoint, what choices I'm going to make from a character building standpoint, what choices I'm going to make from a moral standpoint, all of those things combine to give you a very rich experience that has a lot of replayability and a lot of hopefully difficult choices for you to make along the way to figure out how you want to play this game and what you want your character to be.
This is where we bring back everyone's favourite corporate shill, Reed Tobson. Reed, like most NPCs in this game, is radicalized and has an extremely important quest for you. So let me set this up real quick. As I mentioned at the top, Reed is an outpost administrator for the town of Edgewater. It's a company town run by one of the huge Outer Worlds corporations called Spacer's Choice. The primary function of the town is to run a saltuna cannery which produces a popular food product sold by Spacer's Choice. Edgewater has a large supply of saltuna, which is like a type of space tuna, and so Spacer's Choice set up a town to service the cannery. 2 years before the start of the game, the supply of saltuna declined and the town began to fail to produce enough goods to meet their KPIs. In response to this, Reed, in his wisdom, decided to mix in supplements to fill the quota, adding absolutely wild things like minerals, crushed stones, and poisonous native mushrooms. Now, it won't come as a surprise when I tell you that the main source of sustenance for the people of Edgewater are cans of saltuna, and you will probably be similarly unsurprised to learn that consuming saltuna with mineral, crushed stone, and poisonous mushroom additives isn't the healthiest thing in the world. A plague hit Edgewater and started killing off a bunch of people. Grand lad Reed over here shrugged it off, calling it a test, and continued with the supplements.
I believe plague is a test. It is a test of our loyalty and our fortitude, and it is one we will see through to the end.
Eventually, the taste specialist of Edgewater, a woman named Adelaide McDevitt, lost her son in the plague, and she split from the town along with a number of other people who have now been termed the deserters. You arrive shortly after this point. The town of Edgewater is still suffering under a plague, the productivity of the cannery is at an all-time low, and half of the population are holed up nearby in a place called the Botanical Labs. Your ship has been damaged and you need a power regulator in order to get it working again. The town of Edgewater does have one, but it's needed to, power the town. But Sly Fox Reed has a plan.
I can't let you have our power regulator, but I happen to know of another one, and I happen to know exactly how you may retrieve it without frying yourself in the process. There's a power regulator in the old Botanical Lab. It's mostly abandoned, so all that power is being squandered. Go down to the geothermal plant. Reroute power from the Botanical District over to us. Once their power's shut down, you can have their regulator and be along on your way. The people living in the Botanical Labs, they're deserters, former workers. I need them back at their posts. I need them to come home. If we don't meet our quotas this year, the company might shut us down for good. I need those workers back at their stations. My hope is that by cutting off their power, you will convince those deserters to come back to town. Before you go to the plant, I want you to stop by the Botanical Lab. Speak to their leader, Adelaide. Tell her the power's about to go, and that it's time her band of deserters came back to town.
You get your regulator, the town of Edgewater gets all the people back and everyone's a winner. And that's the setup. As you progress through the mission, you can talk to the deserters and they'll have their side, and you have a nice clear morality choice to make. True to their word, Obsidian has also provided you with several ways to complete this mission. You can divert the power to Edgewater, you can divert the power to the Botanical Labs, you can convince Reed to step down after learning that Adelaide has discovered a cure for the plague. Hell, you can even go pure murder hobo and just kill everyone and take whatever regulator you like. But let's go back to our consistency question. Obsidian here have given us multiple ways to complete this mission, but do they all make sense? Do the characters respond in the way they should, no matter what the player decides to do? Well, let me tell you about how my game went. I was role-playing as an anti-corporate resistance fighter. I went into the game deciding that all of my choices were going to harm the corporations as much as possible. So, naturally, I sided with the deserters and diverted power away from Edgewater and into the labs. With the power gone from Edgewater, the regulator was safe to take, and so I strolled back into town to put the final nail in the coffin. Naturally, Reed is unhappy. I've just betrayed him. I've stripped his town of power, and now I'm here to fully cement the town's demise by taking the power regulator. Reed, in fairness to him, has taken appropriate action. He surrounded the regulator with armed guards, and he himself is there to tell me to back off. I'm going to play you a clip of how things play out, but I just want to make sure you fully understand the stakes here. Reed is the de facto mayor of this town. I have diverted the power away from Edgewater, and now I'm about to rob his power regulator. Up until this point, things are still salvageable for Reed. But now, I'm about to doom the town entirely by taking the regulator. Once that's gone, no flipping a switch is going to save the town of Edgewater. I'll have doomed the town to extinction, and Reed himself acknowledges he'll be imprisoned for gross incompetence, if he even survives at all. So the stakes cannot get higher for Reed here. He has to stop me getting this reactor at all costs.
You want to know what gets my bile churning? Edgewater has suffered a cavalcade of disasters, plague, marauders, desertion. Then you wandered in town, and I was so damn sure our luck was starting to turn. I never knew how right I was. Just answer one question for me. Why'd you do it? You're right. I put the fate of our town in the hands of some feckless transient. This is my fault, and all Edgewater's paying for my mistake. Whatever you were hoping to find down here, I advise you to turn around and leave. I have got guards posted with orders to fire on you. All right, easy now. Let's not do anything we'll regret. I'll order my guards to stand down. Take what you came for and then leave us be.
Alright, easy now. Let's not do anything we'll regret. Reed, my man, if I take this, it's all over. The town is doomed. You'll either die or go to prison forever. You have guards posted, ready to fire. You're ready for this. It's now or never, and I can just threaten you and that's it? What did you think I was going to say? Were you hoping I'd ask nicely as your guards point their guns at me? This, folks, is a conversation vent. I know what the developers are trying here. You have an intimidate skill. It's cool to use in a dramatic moment, but come on. This makes absolutely zero sense and turns this cunning, ruthless outpost administrator into a bloody Peppa Pig character. My 2-year-old son has displayed greater consistency of thought, and that guy thinks he turns invisible when he puts on my wife's sunglasses. I don't want to crap on this quest too much. It's genuinely one of the better quests in the game. There's a lot of options, the stakes are clear, and the scenario is an interesting one. But Obsidian are putting their best foot forward here. The quest design, in my opinion, falls off a cliff as you get further into the game, and you see the stupid persuasion and intimidate conversation vents everywhere. Hey, go kill this person. They're going to report me and get me thrown in prison. Persuasion 40. Ah, but maybe corporate prison is great. Success. You know what? Maybe you're right. Quest complete. 5,000 experience gained. I'm exaggerating here, but not by that much. If you think I'm being harsh, I'd ask you, next time you're playing Outer Worlds, if you ever go back, just look out for when the game uses conversation checks, and look out for how ridiculous they are in terms of solving the quest for you. At the end of the day, is this a big deal? Well, it kind of depends really. Outer Worlds isn't trying to take itself too seriously, I get that. But, like all Obsidian games, they are trying to put effort into their writing. You only need to look online to see how much people love Parvati to see that's the case. It is landing with people. But when you put in these Deus Ex type conversation vents, similar to the issue with level design that H-Bomb was talking about in his video, it rips through the character and reduces them to a farce so the game can give you an additional way to complete a quest. Reed Tobson started off as an interesting, ruthless but also forgiving man who believed strongly in both the corporation he worked with, its values, but also the work ethic of the people of Edgewater. He had good writing put into him. He was like a decently complex character. But thanks to an Intimidate 30 check I passed when I first played through the game, he just ended up being the dumbest mayor.
I'm Reed Tobson,